Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's talk about the world of WWE. Let's talk about night 2 of the WWE Draft. That was last night on Monday Night Raw. Now, we're going to break this down brand by brand. So we're going to start off first with the Raw draft picks, then we'll get into the SmackDown draft picks, then we'll get into the picks that were made on Raw Talk, then we'll get into the free agents. So there's certainly a lot to get into. So let's start off talking about Monday Night Raw. So the first pick of the first round was Becky Lynch, the SmackDown Women's Champion, going to Monday Night Raw. No surprise there. No surprise there. As soon as we saw that Charlotte Flair was going to SmackDown on Friday, they might as well have told us then and there that it was going to be Becky Lynch going to Monday Night Raw. So that wasn't a surprise at all. The way they did it, Becky Lynch comes out, she spoiled it. Well, it was weird actually. She came out and went, I'll do a bit of a spoiler. The man's going to Monday Night Raw. And it was almost a case of the crowd not believing her. The crowd just sort of went, okay. And then they waited for the official announcement and then they popped for it. It was quite strange. But again, no surprise there. The interesting thing now is going to be, how do they get the title off of her and onto someone else? How do they get the championship off of Charlotte Flair and onto someone else? That's going to be interesting to see how they do that. Given that two of the people in that triple threat match for Crown Jewel for the SmackDown Women's Championship, Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair, are on Monday Night Raw now, chances are that Sasha Banks would win that match and maybe Charlotte Flair would drop the title, or they just swap it over. They could just do the swap over. For me, that's lazy. I don't like it when they do that. At least you're a creative team. Be creative, right? That's your job. So I think they could go in that direction, but we'll have to wait and see about that. So Becky Lynch was the first pick for Raw. The next pick was Bobby Lashley. Again, no surprise, really. I think it would have been a surprise if Bobby Lashley had switched brands. He's scheduled to be facing Goldberg at Crown Jewel. We'll touch on that as we go on, but Lashley's going to continue on Monday nights. There is an interesting story about Lashley possibly having plans for the first night of the draft, but WWE opted against doing that, so we'll touch on that as we go through. The next pick, and the final pick of the first round, was Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins is going back to Monday Night Raw. Again, I think this was just the general feeling about last night's Monday Night Raw, about the second night of the draft, is that everything they basically did wasn't surprising. Like Seth Rollins going to Raw last night wasn't surprising because, again, people put two and two together. They went, okay, Becky Lynch is going to Monday Night Raw. That means Rollins going to Monday Night Raw. We know that Edge is going to Raw. This is part of the problem when you spread the draft across two nights, is basically the first night is a really big indicator of where you're going to go for the second night. Even if you don't know the draft pools, and we didn't, but even if you don't know that, after the first night, you can put two and two together, and it's not hard to get to four. So we knew that Seth Rollins was going to go to Raw. We knew that Becky Lynch was going to go to Raw, so it wasn't exactly surprising. And again, that was kind of a recurring theme throughout the night. The next pick, again, not surprising, Damian Priest, the United States Champion, stays on Monday Night Raw. Of course, there could have been a scenario whereby they swapped over the mid-card titles. They've done that in the past. But that wasn't the case here because Nakamura was drafted to SmackDown, but we'll touch on that as we get to the SmackDown picks. The next pick was AJ Styles and Omos staying on Monday Night Raw. Again, not a surprising one because we know the situation when it comes to AJ Styles and SmackDown. Because AJ Styles was on SmackDown and he was happy to be on SmackDown when it was on Tuesday nights. But he mentioned once it went to Friday nights, he likes to be available on Friday night to go to his, I think it's his children's college football game or something like that. So he actually requested last year in the draft, I want to go back to Raw. And the plan was for him to go back to Raw so he would be available for his children on Friday night. So Styles was never, ever, ever going to go to SmackDown because he would be pretty pissed off about that. So, again, that was never happening. So, again, that one wasn't a surprise at all. Speaking of not surprises, Kevin Owens gets drafted to Monday Night Raw. I think everyone predicted that. Everyone predicted that Kevin Owens was going to go to Raw because what was there left? He was doing nothing on SmackDown. I guess the counter argument will be now he will just do nothing on Raw. It felt like he needed a change of scenery. It felt like he needed something different to do. But to be honest with you, and I posted this tweet earlier today on social media, that Kevin Owens is so leaving WWE. He's so leaving WWE at the end of his contract. You can feel it. If you've watched Kevin Owens for the last 3 or 4 weeks, you will know he is done. He is absolutely done in WWE. Just by not his performance, he's not phoning it in or anything like that, but the way that Kevin Owens is being booked is of a guy that hasn't signed a new WWE contract, has maybe even told WWE, look, I'm leaving in January. We know his contract's up, and it looks like he's going, and I can't blame him. If he hasn't said that to WWE, and WWE genuinely doesn't know, we don't really know what Kevin Owens is going to do, in January if he's going to sign a new contract. If WWE thinks this is legitimately the best creative for him, then that's even more alarming. But it's not. He's on his way out, no doubt about it. Next pick was the Street Profits going to Monday Night Raw. With the New Day being on SmackDown, it felt, again, inevitable that the Street Profits would come in. Again, they've kind of done everything on SmackDown. They were part of the draft last year, and there's an interesting story about the Street Profits, actually, and we'll touch on that in a bit, but again, no picks were particularly surprising. This was an interesting one. Finn Balor goes to Monday Night Raw, but what was fascinating about this one with Finn Balor going to Monday Night Raw is this is a guy that was main eventing pay-per-view. Now, the pay-per-view was Extreme Rules in September. It was a nothing show. It felt like a complete, a pit stop between SummerSlam and Crown Jewel, those being the big two events with the big storylines, that being Reigns versus Lesnar. And Extreme Rules just felt like a complete afterthought of, we've got a show, let's fill an arena, we'll just have Balor go up against Roman Reigns. That's what it was, essentially. And again, but this guy, he still main evented a show. He was still competing for the Universal Championship. Had it not been for the rope breaking, he would be Universal Champion, if that's what WWE wants you to believe. So if that is the case, why on earth is this guy like the third pick in the fourth round? Talk about not being important. I just saw that. I was like, okay. Speaking of not being important, Karrion Kross stays on Monday Night Raw. He wrestled on main event last night, so despite wearing overalls and a mask, like a sort of weird construction worker mixed with demolition, it's crazy to me when we talk about Karrion Kross, because again, this is a guy, and I know not everything translates from NXT to the main roster. I know Vince McMahon is trying to address that with NXT 2.0, but the evidence is there. Like Karrion Kross, this guy was undefeated for like 18 months, was the NXT champion, and he's on main event, and he's getting drafted later on in the draft, and no one cares. Nobody cares. The next pick for Raw was Alexa Bliss. She's staying on Monday Night Raw. She's still going to be off TV for a while, by all accounts. They played up last night that she's had a big breakdown, and when she returns, she might return to something completely different. But Bliss is staying on Monday Night Raw. It's a bit surprising, that one. I could have seen her be drafted to SmackDown, it must be said, considering that Charlotte Flair's going there, so she could have gone to SmackDown, picked up with that feud. She has been on Raw, obviously, since the last draft, and she's very, very popular, and you tend to find the people that are super, super popular would make their way to SmackDown, you would think, but that isn't the case, so Alexa Bliss is sticking on Monday nights. The next one was Carmella, moving to Monday Night Raw. I don't really have much to say on it, to be honest. It's just shaking up the Raw Women's division, so that is what that is. This was an interesting one. Gable Steveson, yes, Olympic gold medalist Gable Steveson was drafted to Monday Night Raw. Now, this was reported just before the draft. It must be said like 30 minutes, 45 minutes before the draft went on the air. Fightful broke the story, I think, saying that Gable Steveson was going to be drafted to Monday Night Raw. He was going to be part of the draft. I was shocked, it must be said, by the amount of comments and tweets and people saying on social media of, oh, what does NXT even mean then? Oh, he's skipping straight to the main roster. Why isn't he going through NXT? Oh, this just shows that WWE doesn't care about NXT. It took Gable Steveson being drafted to the main roster to make you realize that WWE doesn't care about NXT. Of course he don't care about NXT. That's hardly news. Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard, they've just revamped the entire brand because they don't care about NXT. It took Gable Steveson being drafted to Monday Night Raw for you to go, oh, they don't really care about NXT that much. What? I just mentioned Karrion Kross. The guy's in overalls and a mask right now. Everyone else from NXT's changing a million different times. It took Gable Steveson skipping the brand for you to go, oh, I can't believe they don't care, or what is NXT even for? And I know people won't like me saying this, but it's true. There have always been exceptions to the rule. Yes, most people go through NXT, but there have always been exceptions to the rule, whether that's someone that is just so overly qualified, if you will, like an AJ Styles, that they don't need to go through NXT because they just don't need to go. They're far more beneficial to be on the main roster as opposed to going through NXT. And there are exceptions to the rules of people that are just that famous, if you will, that are non-wrestlers, that again, it makes no sense for them to go through NXT from a publicity and from a ratings and from a monetary point of view. Gable Stevenson's money to WWE isn't being in NXT. Gable Stevenson's money is being on the main roster in the same way that Ronda Rousey, her money to WWE was being on the main roster. But you think Ronda Rousey was going to be in NXT takeovers? No, of course she wasn't going to. There are always exceptions to the rules. There always are. And Gable Stevenson's obviously an exception to the rule. He's an Olympic gold medalist. People might not like it, but WWE, they make their money on the main roster. That's where they make their money. They don't make their money in NXT. Granted, if he went through NXT, would he learn more? Absolutely he would. But there would be less of a spotlight on him. There's, 600,000 viewers watching NXT on Tuesday nights. And I'm sure they're paying Gable Steveson a lot of money. If they're paying him a lot of money, he's learning to wrestle while he's doing his final year of college or whatever that may be, competing in the NCAA tournaments. But still, his money's on the main roster. I don't subscribe to the criticism that some people are saying about that when they're like, I can't believe he skipped NXT. Really? You can't believe he skipped NXT? How is that a surprise? How is that? It's not a surprise at all. So I didn't really get the criticism behind that one, it must be said. Also announced with some picks on Raw Talk 2 after the show. These were the likes of Dana Brooke, Dolph Ziggler, Robert Roode, Jackson Riker, Via. There was Liv Morgan. There was Mia Yim. There was Tamina. There was Shelton Benjamin, Cedric Alexander, The Miz, Tegan Knox. So they split up, and I think there's only one female tag team at this point, which is crazy as well. Interesting that they split up via Shanky and Jinder Mahal, because Shanky and Jinder Mahal went to SmackDown. But I think the evidence was kind of there of that last week, because didn't Via got a big pinfall victory in his match last week on Raw, and they were playing up his history in the minor leagues in terms of baseball. So I think there might be more to that one. We might see some more of Via in the next couple of weeks on Monday Night Raw in terms of being a single star. But look, again, in terms of a draft in general, night 2, not really any surprises. Maybe the biggest one was Gable Steveson being drafted by Monday Night Raw from the Raw side of things. But again, the criticism don't really understand, to be honest with you, that people are now suddenly surprised. I can't believe they skipped NXT. What did you expect? So let's go through the SmackDown picks from night 2 of the WWE Draft. Again, no real major surprises. The first pick was the Usos, so the SmackDown Tag Team Champions are staying on Friday Night SmackDown. That was kind of, to be honest, it was a bit underwhelming, that, because they laid a bit of a teaser, didn't they? The teaser that they had was Roman Reigns saying to the Usos, go to Raw, make sure Paul Heyman gets you drafted to SmackDown. If he doesn't, leave him for dead. There'll be hell to pay, all that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, they're going to play this up. And they didn't. They just went, SmackDown have drafted the Usos. They cut backstage, and the Usos and Heyman were there. And Paul Heyman's giving it like, and he's all very, happy and all that kind of stuff, and relieved, shall we say. Looked like he hasn't shaven a little bit. Nice little details, stuff like that. But that was it. So that cliffhanger didn't really lead to anything. I guess it was just continually to build to the Lesnar versus Reigns match at Crown Jewel. Next picks was Sasha Banks, sticking on Friday Night SmackDown. Again, I think most people probably expected that. We saw Banks obviously close the show when she attacked everyone, including Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, and Bianca Belair after Belair and Charlotte Flair's match. Next pick was Shinsuke Nakamura, Intercontinental Champion, and Rick Boogs. Again, I like Rick Boogs, and I like Nakamura, obviously, but the fact that Rick Boogs was being picked ahead of someone like Finn Balor, to me, is crazy. But the Intercontinental Championship stays on SmackDown. Again, no major surprise. They're not swapping the mid-card titles. This was an interesting one, a switch of brands. Sheamus moves to Friday Night SmackDown. I think Sheamus, arguably, in terms of Monday Night Raw in maybe the last sort of 12 months, as soon as when he moved there, because he moved to Raw in the draft last year, he has been such an MVP of that show. Honestly, he really has been an MVP of that show, in the sense that this is a guy that has just, every single time he steps in the ring, he has a good match. And I know some people find Sheamus boring or bland or all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. But I think he's so underrated. He's just such a great worker. Everything he does, he's involved in just great matches all the time, whether that's against Drew McIntyre, whether that's against whoever that may be. Even when going back to the feud with Jeff Hardy on SmackDown last year, and they're both on the same brand now, actually, by the way, heaven forbid. But they're both on the same brand. And even back then, the storyline stuff, but the matches were good, because Sheamus has great matches. He really is so undervalued and underrated, in my opinion. Maybe not in terms of the company, but just the wider respect that he receives on social media. I like the next pick, Shayna Baszler, moving to Friday Night SmackDown. The reason I like it is because it feels like they're building up Baszler at this point. She's just going through people on Monday Night Raw, whether that's Nia Jax, whether that's Eva Marie. She was going to go through Dana Brooke last night until Doudrop made the save. And I was kind of concerned. I went, is that really what they're building to? Shayna Baszler versus Doudrop. They'll probably pay it off in the terms of the next couple of weeks, one would assume. on Monday Night Raw, because, of course, this doesn't take into effect until after Crown Jewel. They stressed out about 10 million times during the broadcast on SmackDown and Raw, but Baszler's going to SmackDown, and that, to me, is quite interesting. That is interesting, because I'm game for them getting behind Shayna Baszler. They should have done it a long time ago, in my opinion, but Baszler's an interesting one. We had an NXT draft here next, because Xia Li is going to SmackDown. To me, that means that the whole Tian Sha thing's dead in NXT. It was dead anyway because Xia Li hasn't been on NXT television for weeks. So again, that wasn't a total surprise. There was a feeling that she would be called up. I'm interested to see what they do with her, but it doesn't scream to me, oh yes, SmackDown have got a big pick there. My concern is she'll just become another name in the division, but I could be wrong with that one. The Viking Raiders moving to SmackDown. This is an interesting one because they've always ever been on Raw. Obviously, big fan of the Viking Raiders. Or they were involved in that 24/7 championship segment last night, which was just alarming. Whenever anyone's involved in that, everyone just goes, oh, here we go. But that was an interesting one. Another switch of brands here. Ricochet moving from Raw to SmackDown. I would love to think that Ricochet switching brands in the draft means something in terms of, oh, the guy's going to get featured. I'm a Ricochet fan. Of course I'm a Ricochet fan. His work in the ring is tremendous. He can do things that hardly anyone else can do, and he is way underutilized by WWE. He can't cut a promo to save his life. There is no, you can't change my mind about that. And people that are like, you should push this guy to the moon, I'm always like, we know what Vince McMahon wants. He wants a promo guy. He wants a guy that can do it all, that can cut promos. Just being a good in-ring guy isn't enough. But what I do say in response to that is, give him a manager. Give him a manager. Give him someone to cut promos for him. Why does it have to be, well, he can't cut promos, so he sucks? No, we know he's great in the ring and he can have great matches. But hopefully it leads to something on SmackDown, but I don't know if I see that, to be honest with you. Next pick for SmackDown was Humberto Carrillo and Angel Garza. I really like this tag team. It must be said, they've had a couple matches on Raw in the last couple of weeks. They've been winning matches. Of course, they're cousins. I'm just glad to see two talented guys being used, and they've got a great upside. So I do think that could lead to something, it must be said, on SmackDown. Next pick was Cesaro. No surprise there. Not really a lot to say on it. Cesaro signed a new deal earlier this year, got his Universal Championship match against Roman Reigns, which was a great match. Got his match at WrestleMania, his victory over Seth Rollins, which was, again, great match. Called off recently. Hopefully with new stars coming on to SmackDown, maybe there might be something else for him to do. I'd love to see Cesaro feud with Nakamura. Of course, they were former tag team partners. Why not feud over the Intercontinental Championship? The matches would be great. Really would be great. Next pick was another NXT pick that saw Ridge Holland move to Friday Night SmackDown. I know that they have really high hopes of Ridge Holland from the even prior to his just horrible injury. They had really big plans and hopes for Ridge Holland in NXT. Obviously, he's got the look that they're looking for. I don't know about his promos. Obviously, being a Brit, obviously I'm a bit biased, but I don't know about his promo ability, it must be said. But in terms of his look and his work rate, I know WWE has big plans for him. They were very impressed about his ability to come back from injury as well. His comeback from the injury was unbelievable in the time frame, considering the injury he suffered. So will be interesting to see what they've got planned for him on SmackDown. And finally, the last pick was Sami Zayn. Now, I know some people have said, oh, it's complete slander. How is Sami Zayn the final pick? I do tend to think that might be storyline related. This is a guy that's completely driven by conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff, right? Being the final pick kind of lends into that, I guess. So maybe I'm giving WWE too much credit there, but I kind of think that's where they might be going with the whole Sami Zayn thing, it must be said. And the other picks revealed on Talking Smack, on Raw Talk rather, were Shotzi Blackheart, because of course she's split up with Tegan Nox now, Natalya, who was split up from Tamina, and Jinder Mahal and Shanky. So if you're a female tag team, don't bother. Just get rid of the belts at this point. What is the point? What is the point? All the other teams are gone. It just feels so redundant, doesn't it? I really don't understand that, it must be said. We do have some free agents as well now officially announced, because of course WWE mentioned that anyone that wasn't signed to either or signed to a brand, drafted to a brand, would be a free agent going forward. Now, as previously noted, WWE announced that half the roster would be drafted during last Friday's SmackDown, the other half during this week's edition of Raw. There were also picks announced during Talking Smack and Raw Talk. It was announced that superstars that were not drafted on Monday or Friday would automatically become free agents and able to sign with the brand of their choosing. So in an update, these are the free agents that have yet to be drafted. One is Asuka, who is currently out with an injury, it would appear. Of course, Bayley, we know she's out with an injury. Brock Lesnar's a free agent. He announced so Friday night on SmackDown. Elias being a free agent is interesting because, you remember those vignettes? Elias is dead. Apparently he is, because there is no Elias anywhere. So I don't know what's planned for Elias. He is kind of in purgatory at this moment. I would explain him being dead. But I don't know what the case is with Elias. We'll have to wait and see. I have no idea what the case is. But it's so typical WWE, isn't it? Air some vignettes for 2 or 3 weeks, get cold feet, go in a different direction. Now he's a free agent. He's not even on any brand. So maybe that's part of the storyline. I don't know. I'll try and give him some slack for that one. Eva Marie, she's currently, I guess, out of an injury. I don't know if it's real or kayfabe, but she got stomped on by Shayna Baszler a couple of weeks ago, so she could show up on either brand. Gran Metalik and Lindsay Dorado are free agents, which is interesting. Of course, there was the report a couple of weeks ago that Gran Metalik had requested his release by WWE. They could go anywhere. They could go back to NXT. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened at all. John Cena's a free agent, even though he was always going to be a free agent. He's been a free agent ever since, really. I mean, he was drafted to SmackDown when the brand extension first came back in 2016, but since then, he's been a free agent. Lacey Evans is a free agent. Of course, she's currently away on paternity leave after announcing her pregnancy earlier this year. Shane McMahon is a free agent if he's still with WWE. There's been lots of speculation about his future with the company. Slapjack, aka Shane Thorne, is a free agent. Wouldn't be surprised to see him going back to NXT. The whole Retribution thing is just, I mean, it died a long time ago, but now even Mace and T-Bar have been split up, so I guess Slapjack could be the next name to change. I wouldn't be shocked if he went back to NXT, to be honest with you. Titus O'Neil is also a free agent. Not that he ever really appears on WWE television that much nowadays. He's an ambassador, brand ambassador, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, technically he's a Hall of Famer now, so that's no surprise there. I don't even know when he had his last match, to be honest with you. And, of course, The Undertaker's a free agent. Not that he's an active competitor, so I'm not sure why people would be talking about him as an actual talent, because he's not. Yes, he's under contract, but he's still, not. He's retired, right? That was his final farewell was at Survivor Series last year, right? Right? You never know. Speaking of the draft, this is an interesting story here. Now, there was reportedly an original cliffhanger was actually scheduled for SmackDown on Friday when it comes to the draft and the Raw side of things, because the original plan for last Friday's WWE Draft Night 1 edition of SmackDown was to have Bobby Lashley actually be the number 1 draft pick for the Raw brand. The idea behind Lashley as the number 1 Raw pick was that fans would have to tune in to Raw on Monday night to see where WWE Champion Big E ended up, especially after the New Day's Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods were drafted to SmackDown on Friday. And that was noted by PW Insider that the cliffhanger idea was dropped over the course of the day this past Friday, with Big E replacing Lashley as the top draft pick for the Red brand. It must be said, I don't really... I think it's probably the right call. I can see WWE's thinking behind that. I can see their idea of thinking, well, if we give a bit of a cliffhanger, maybe they'll tune into Raw to see what will happen. But when Big E inevitably got drafted to Raw, people would just say, well, we knew that was going to happen anyway. So it's not much of a cliffhanger. A legitimate cliffhanger is you asking lots of questions. Is WWE going to do something crazy? And when they don't, it feels like a letdown. So in reality, I think it was probably the right call, because people would have said it was predictable anyway. And the draft last night was predictable even without the Big E cliffhanger, to be honest with you. So it was probably the right call just to have him be drafted on Friday. This is an interesting news story coming out of the draft as well, that WWE reportedly considered singles runs for both Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins coming out of the 2021 WWE Draft. Now, as noted, the first pick in the 4th round of Monday's Draft Night 2 edition of Raw saw the Red brand select the Street Profits to come over from SmackDown. This, of course, came after Raw's second pick of the first round on Friday's SmackDown saw the Red brand draft Montez's Ford wife Bianca Belair, so people expected the Street Profits to come over. But in an update, PW Insider has reported that there was serious consideration put into breaking up the Street Profits. The idea is that Ford would be moved to Raw without Dawkins but with Belair, while Dawkins would have stayed on SmackDown. And the split talk lessened over the course of the last week. Instead, WWE officials decided at SmackDown's on Friday to split T-Bar and Mace instead. The draft picks were announced on Saturday's Talking Smack episode, which included T-Bar staying on Raw, with SmackDown selecting Mace. Now, it must be said, I know some people go, that's a load of rubbish, that isn't going to happen. There is a lot of weight to this story, because when you have to think, a couple of weeks ago on SmackDown, what happened? Montez Ford faced Roman Reigns, because Ford received praise on social media for his non-title singles match with Universal Champion Roman Reigns on the September 24 edition of SmackDown. I've said several times on social media that for me, Montez Ford can be a future WWE champion or Universal champion, not just because of his ability in the ring, but his charisma is off the charts. And every time I say this, I get a bit of a negative response from people that say, why are you trying to split them up? Don't try and split them up. At the end of the day, to WWE, they see these people as dollars and cents. What they see is, okay, Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins make us money as the Street Profits, but Montez Ford being a main event guy, being a charismatic guy, and a guy that can hang with Roman Reigns, we saw it. That match was a bit of a tryout, if anything. That guy can make us even more money as a single star. And WWE knows that. They absolutely know that. So whilst it didn't happen this time, it's going to happen eventually, I think, anyway. So Montez Ford's upside is massive. My concern would be about Angelo Dawkins. Not that he's not charismatic or he can't succeed, but for me, Montez Ford is the star of that tag team, and eventually he will become a single star in WWE. I really have no doubts about that. Let's switch gears here, talk about Crown Jewel. Lots of Crown Jewel announcements last night on Raw. Drew McIntyre versus Big E is now set for Crown Jewel. The match was made official last night on Monday Night Raw. Of course, it was teased last week or the week prior, wasn't it? That Drew McIntyre wanted a shot at Big E and all that kind of stuff. For me, obviously, the match is big. But there's only one winner here. And that's Big E. Big E, of course, not just because his WWE Championship reign has just started, but also Drew McIntyre's on SmackDown at this point. So unless WWE... Easy for me to say. Unless WWE went for a monumental change whereby they had Drew McIntyre take the WWE Championship to SmackDown, and then they had Brock Lesnar beat Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship, then sign with Raw as a free agent. They could do that. It would be very surprising. I don't see that happening, but they could do that. So whilst it should be a great match, and it's a big match, I think it's a name that Big E can beat to establish himself as a credible champion, because I don't think Drew McIntyre is going to win the WWE Championship anytime soon. The next title he could win might be the Universal Championship. I suppose from a curiosity point of view, Drew McIntyre's lost a lot of matches recently. Whether that's against Sheamus, whether that's against people like Damian Priest, whether that's against whoever. He has lost matches recently, so it'll be interesting to see if he's going to eat another loss at Crown Jewel. I think he probably will. Speaking of Crown Jewel, another match announced was the match we knew was coming, but it's made official now. It's a no-holds-barred match between Goldberg and Bobby Lashley. Goldberg was on Raw last night. He had a segment with Lashley. Lashley actually challenged him to a no-holds-barred match, which I never get. Like, that doesn't... Surely it would be in Goldberg's prerogative to go, I want to face you in a no-holds-barred match, as opposed to Lashley going, I'm going to face you in a no-holds-barred match. Why? Like, Goldberg actually reacted to it in a sane way, in the sense that he challenged him to this no-holds-barred match. He actually got on his knees. He went, thank you. Because he was like, that's what I've been asking for. If you're a heel in Bobby Lashley, surely your idea would be, I'm not going to give him what he wants. But instead he gave him exactly what he wants. Now, we all know the outcome of this one. Goldberg's getting his win back. I have no problem with Goldberg facing Lashley in this kind of match because it's not for the title. Everyone knows that. I don't have an issue with Goldberg working or having matches as long as he's not involved in the title picture, because he doesn't need to be and he shouldn't be. I do have a concern when it comes to Goldberg's going to disappear after this match for a while. And what does that do for Bobby Lashley? Because he's going to have lost the WWE Championship. He lost to Big E on Raw in a steel cage as well. Now he's going to lose to Goldberg, and Goldberg's going to disappear. What does that do for Lashley? Not a hell of a lot. But I think Goldberg wins this one because he hasn't won in ages, and it's not for the title, so they don't have to switch any bouts or anything like that. So that's going to happen. Interesting note, though, when it comes to Goldberg and his contract regarding these Saudi shows, because he's always on these Saudi shows, it's been reported an interesting clause that comes in Goldberg's contract about these Saudi shows, because on the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer radio show, Dave Meltzer noted that Goldberg has a specific deal for these Saudi shows. This would make it unlikely that his rematch against Lashley would be on TV or anything like that, because it would mean a loss of millions of dollars to Goldberg. According to WWE's earning reports, they receive around $55 million for these large-scale international events. It's an astronomical amount of money. How Goldberg's WWE contract runs through 2023. He recently revealed that he has 2 matches left in his deal. It's likely he renegotiated this deal to fit in the Saudi show, so he's still going to probably have 2 matches next year too. But he receives a lot of money. And I think just because of the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, WWE moved some things around, or like I said, he renegotiated a new deal because they weren't sure when they were going to go back or anything like that. But make no mistake, Goldberg receives millions of dollars for just minutes of work. I mean, we're talking, like any match is minutes of work, but when we're talking Goldberg, we're talking 2 or 3 minutes. He will get a payment of like $2-3 million. It's astronomical. It's astronomical. It's crazy money. It's crazy money. Fair play to him for working that out. I have no, the heat's on WWE when it comes to that one, not Goldberg. He got a great deal. Who wouldn't take that money? So, but we know what's going to happen. Goldberg's going to win that match, unfortunately. And then social media will explode, as always. Another match announced was the Raw Tag Team Championship match has been announced. It's a rematch from SummerSlam. And that RK Bro are facing AJ Styles and Omos. Randy Orton was back on Monday Night Raw last night, so that whole thing with Dave Meltzer saying Randy Orton isn't cleared isn't true, obviously. But they're going to have a rematch. They teased all through last night that Randy Orton was going to face Omos. He challenged him. They came out, and the match didn't happen. Instead, they had a bit of a brawl, a bit of a skirmish. So I think Riddle and Orton retain the tag team titles, I would assume. I don't really know what's next for Styles and Omos after this. It must be said, I don't think Omos is ready to go out on his own, so I would just assume that Styles just moves on to facing someone else. Maybe Finn Balor. They have history, I guess, kind of, being part of the same club at different times. Maybe they'll go towards that on Monday Night Raw. We'll have to wait and see. The SmackDown ratings were out for Friday as well. Friday's live post-Extreme Rules WWE Night 1 edition of SmackDown drew an average of 2.252 million viewers on Fox, according to Nielsen via Showbuzz Daily. This final number is up nearly 12% from the overnight viewership that was released on Saturday morning. The number is also up over 5% from last week's final viewership of 2.135 million viewers for the Extreme Rules Go Home show. This was to be expected, obviously. The WWE Draft is a big draw. It'll be interesting to see what it does for Raw tonight, or when the ratings come out tonight, rather. SmackDown drew a 0.62 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. This is up over 12%, nearly 13% from last week's 0.55 rating for that Extreme Rules Go Home show. Very impressive, to be honest with you. SmackDown was ranked number 1 in the ratings for the key 18 to 49 demographic for network TV for the second week in a row. It ranked number 2 in the 18 to 34 demo this week. Ending a 7-week run at number 1. It ranked number 3 in the 25 to 54 demo, down from last week's number 2 spot. It also came in at 8 for the night on when it comes to viewership for network television, down from last week's number 7 spot. So they'll be very, very happy with this. Friday, SmackDown drew the third best audience since fans returned to the live crowd. It was tied with one other show, the September 3rd show. It was also up nearly 4.5% from the same week in 2020. The key demo was up over 3% from the same week in 2020 as well. So they'll be very, very happy with this. Obviously very happy with this. I can't criticize SmackDown. SmackDown's an overall good show to watch, and the ratings and viewership reflects that. I always say it should be, considering that it's on network television, but it's very impressive. SmackDown's not the problem. It is not the problem. SmackDown, if Raw was like SmackDown, you wouldn't have a ton to complain about. There would be things to complain about because there's always things to critique and praise, but I have no issues with SmackDown. I really don't. I would maybe prefer the women's division to be booked a little bit better in terms of other people as opposed to, Becky Lynch, Banks, and Belair, but that's nitpicking, if I'm honest with you. So I have no issues with SmackDown whatsoever. Finally, there's been a lot of conversation about Walter recently. There was a rumor that he might be involved in the WWE Draft, which of course didn't happen. PW Insider reported that there's been a lot of talk about how WWE can use Walter beyond the NXT UK brand as of late. Apparently, he was in the United States this past weekend, leading to speculation he was going to be involved in the draft, which of course he wasn't. He hasn't wrestled since dropping the NXT UK Championship to Ilya Dragunov at TakeOver 36 during SummerSlam weekend. WWE's wanted to use Walter on the main roster for a while. They've wanted to use him in NXT, the proper brand, on a consistent basis. But when Walter signed with WWE, he told them, I'm not moving to the United States. Now, obviously, anything can change. If they threw a lot of money at him, maybe that would change. But in his mind, he's just not interested. And why would have anything changed on that front, especially with the pandemic right now? So I don't see Walter being on the main roster anytime soon. NXT, I don't even see that happening anytime soon. He had his deal, and if WWE doesn't want him, if they say, look, otherwise we're not going to keep you on the contract, he'll go and do very well on the independent scene. So they want to keep Walter. I think they're just having these discussions about, can we convince him? What kind of figures would you be interested in into coming over full time? We'll have to wait and see. But look, guys, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these WWE news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Got the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.